Hey there, everybody. My name's Ian Levinstein, and welcome to a Comic Timing Extra Point. Been a while since I've done one of these extra points, but as you can see, it is just me, for this portion at least. Soon it will not be, as I've got a bunch of convention audio that has been sitting in a can, some of which approaching a year, as I do way too often in life, and others that are a little bit fresher, a little bit newer. And I figure, why not release them all in one episode? Now, these two bits of convention coverage are two different types of conventions. The first is from last year in 2022. Why did I say 2022? In 2022, that's the Chris Eberly influence on me. Whenever he does an episode number, he always says the full 1,900 and, well, whatever. Anywho, it's from 2022 at AnimeNYC, a convention that I am about to attend in 2023 as I record this. AnimeNYC is a annual anime convention held at the Jacob Javits Center. In fact, that is the going theme of both segments of this episode, as both of them took place at the Jacob Javits Center. One just took place a year ago, and the other one took place last month. The other one, of course, being New York Comic Con 2023. Anyway, let me explain AnimeNYC to you first, as that one is upcoming. And when this episode is released, it'll probably be day one of AnimeNYC. So if any of you happen to see me, I should theoretically be there on November 17th and November 19th. I'm hoping that I'm able to make it there on a Sunday. No promises as of yet, but I'm definitely going to be there all day on Friday. For a couple of years there really wasn't a big anime convention in New York City. Then Reed made one. And that one lasted a little while. That was called Anime Fest, New York Anime Fest. And it was held separately from New York Comic Con for a few years. I think for about 5 years, if I remember correctly. And then eventually they merged it into New York Comic Con for a year or two. 1 year it took place at an entirely separate site, which was not a good idea, but it was New York Comic Con weekend. And it was over in one of the piers about 30 blocks down from where New York Comic Con was taking place. I did not go to that. I was already at New York Comic Con. I was going to make my way down to a separate venue that was completely out of the way for that. It was actually the same venue that they held their special convention a couple of years. The NYC Special, I think it was called. NYC Special Edition, that's what it was. NYC Special Edition. They held at this particular location once, and Big Apple Con also worked out of that pier location at least once or twice. Then they merged New York Anime Fest into New York Comic Con. It had a separate anime artist alley for a few years. And then they stopped doing that entirely, and they just merged anime and manga into comic books. And for a while there afterwards, there was not a big convention in New York. You'd have to either go to New Jersey or Pennsylvania or Connecticut in order to make it happen. And then AnimeNYC was born. Now, AnimeNYC has existed for a couple of years now. Its first year, I actually could not attend because it was the exact same weekend as PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia. And I was already set to attend that. And, frankly, when given a choice between one of my favorite conventions of the year, that's a little bit different than an anime or a comic book convention or AnimeNYC, I chose PAX Unplugged that year. That was 2017. Since then, they've held pretty firm on their dates in November, which is a crapshoot when it comes to weather in New York City. One of the reasons why New York Comic Con never worked in February was because nobody wanted to walk around in the freezing cold in New York and go all the way over to Javits. And this was before there was a 7 train stop at the Javits Center, which may or may not be working this weekend. Guess what? I'm going to find out. But nonetheless, you used to have to walk all the way over from Penn Station, Madison Square Garden to Javits Center, which is like 4 avenues, and it's a long walk. It's a trek. It's a pain in the ass. I'm not a fan of doing that. This year, luckily, it's not going to be disastrously cold. It's going to be like low 60s, mid 50s for walking over to Javits and walking back from Javits, which will be a nice change of pace. But yeah, it's been pretty much the same weekend. Right before Thanksgiving, every year they hold an anime convention at Jacob Javits. Attendance has gone up significantly every single year. The first one was only 20,000 people. Last year, their turnstile estimate, according to their reporting, was 55,000 people attending AnimeNYC, which is beyond amazing that they've been able to go to such a build in such a short amount of time. This is put on by Left Field Media, who also do Awesome Con out in Washington, D.C., so they are not strangers to the convention field, but they're certainly smaller than a Reed that puts on 87 conventions every freaking year. I will say that my major complaint about AnimeNYC is that they really do not have a panel schedule that has ever really truly appealed to me. There's a lot of industry stuff, and I mean, don't get me wrong, industry stuff is great, but I can find out about industry stuff, the next day or even the same day by, going on to a website and finding out all the information. I don't have to wait on a line of thousands of people to get into a Crunchyroll panel. Like, no, I can easily do that online without any real issue there. My other issue with it is that when we do get a fan panel or when we do get something that's a little bit, more unique, the timing usually sucks. At least from what I remember, is that they would all happen early in the morning or late at night, and by then you're not really that interested anymore, which is upsetting and a little bit annoying. And I don't know if that's going to happen this year, but hopefully there will be a couple more panels that catch my eye this time around. And as proof that sometimes it pays to be last minute on this stuff, as I was prepping the recording for this, news came out via AnimeNYC's Twitter today that they're moving. They're not moving space, they're moving time. So, as I said, for years, AnimeNYC has been in November. And as of 2024, they are officially moving to August. So they're moving from potentially freezing weather to potentially boiling weather in New York City. August 23rd to 25th, 2024 is when the next AnimeNYC is going to be. Now, what's the benefit of this? Is that rather than being limited to half of the Javits Center that they've been limited to up until now, they are going to have the full Javits. So this is really going to be a test to see just how many people are interested in going to AnimeNYC. They're going to be allowed to sell more tickets. That includes more weekend tickets. And they will have more space overall to be able to fill the main Javits building for the first time. They specifically say the main Javits, so I don't think this is going to include Javits North, but this will give them way more leeway to use all of downstairs and upstairs, which hopefully means one of my other criticisms of the show, which is their panels, will be solved, as they will have the ability to have more panels and more features and more fan-featured events in the future. Apparently, the tickets for 2024 will be going on sale December 5th, 2023. So keep an eye out for that, and glad I was able to add this into my breakdown of the show before it came out. So big ups to Anime NYC. 2024 will be taking place August 23rd to 25th, the first time that they will be outside of their November window in the history of the show. How about them apples? But anyway, last year I was walking around the con, and I managed to get 2 interviews with 2 individuals, one of which I've known for years and is a really awesome human being that has been working as a translator and adapter of materials for many years now. And his name is Zach Davison. Zach I've known through the anime beer world for years. Yes, I said beer, not beard, by the way. We used to go to Otakon in either Baltimore or DC on a regular basis. I haven't been in a few years now, but almost every single year there would be this beer swap amongst us fellow nerds called Otabrew. And that's how I got to know Zach, was through that crowd. Specifically the ones that would happen at AnimeNYC every year in New Jersey. I actually got a chance to run one year, and that was a heck of a lot of fun. And that's really like when we really got to bond a little bit. But last year we actually went out to Bronx Brewery, which has a location not too far from Javits. It's actually in the Hudson Mall that has been created. That's Hudson Yards. That's the manufactured neighborhood that didn't exist a few years ago that magically popped up out of nowhere that now exists in New York City. Not too far from where the 7 train stop is that lets you off right by that area. Anyway, we went there, and then Zach was exhibiting last year. He is also exhibiting this year. So if you are going to be at Anime NYC, find him. His name is spelled Zack. And then Davison, Davison. He is an Eisner-winning translator and writer and lecturer. He's worked on Demon Days. He's worked on Art of Star Wars Visions, which we do talk about a little bit in the interview. And he's regularly putting out new stuff and working on new projects. He actually got to work for Marvel not too long ago as well. And when he did... that was kind of like I wouldn't quite say like a life's dream for him, but it was certainly a cool thing to be able to put on your business card. Is that I've done translation work, and I've also worked for Marvel. Mostly the stuff that he got to work on was the Demon Wars stuff that Peach Momoko put out a couple of years ago for Marvel. Super cool, and most of that is available on Marvel Unlimited if you want to check it out. And there's also some collections that you'd be able to purchase in actual physical form if you are still one of those people who does that, and one of you people who enjoys the previews episode that we put out every single month. Go figure. But Zach's a really awesome dude. I only had a couple of minutes with him, and you'll notice that on the recording, if I keep it in, which I probably will, is that he actually had a flight to catch up. Both of these interviews took place on the Sunday of Anime NYC, and Zach lives in the Seattle area, and he had to catch his flight back home. But I managed to get a few minutes with him before he had to head off. One of the guys he was tabling next to, who also joined us at Bronx Brewery, his name is Robert Wilson IV. And he's a illustrator out of Oklahoma City who's worked on some stuff for Vault. He also worked on Bitch Planet for Image Comics. He's also active in the poster community and has made posters for everyone from Metallica to the Mountain Goats to Weird Al. you name it, and he's probably done it at least once. So yeah, we had a really fun conversation as well that I'm going to be including in this, and I really hope that you guys like it. I also hope that if you're in the New York area, that you do give Anime NYC a shot. If you're into anime at all, I'm sure there'll be plenty of comic book cosplay, because I've said this before in other situations, that I feel like The only real difference between an anime and a Comic-Con when it comes to cosplay is that you're probably going to find younger people at an anime convention than you will at a Comic-Con for the most part. And then you could sort of like graduate into being at a comic convention, and you roll from there. I hope I don't get hate mail for the graduate comment, but I've always kind of felt that way, where like you start off at anime convention, then eventually you broaden your horizons a little bit further, and then you wind up at a comic convention, unless you only have comic conventions in your area, and in which case that's what you're going to stick with, and that's also perfectly A-OK. Once we're all said and done, I'll probably pop back on for a moment just to wrap the episode up. But just leaving a review on iTunes or anywhere that you can leave a review, or just letting us know your thoughts on the Facebook or on YouTube or anywhere that you happen to be listening to the show is greatly appreciated. Thank you for everybody who continues to support and listen to the show in any way that you can. All right, and with that, I'm going to hand things over now to myself in a very awkward fashion, because it's weird whenever I do that, but that's the way this is going to happen. And here are those AnimeNYC interviews. Enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Sunday here at AnimeNYC. And those of you who listen to me know that I didn't do any on-the-scene reporting at New York Comic Con because I was here for 1.25 days. This one, all 3 days. It feels like 4 days. Here with Zach Davidson, translator, friend, sold out of all of his books. It's been a successful weekend.
It has. AnimeNYC is one of my favorite shows. I think this is like my fourth year coming here. Sold out entirely last year. Sold out entirely this year. Just hope to keep coming back for as long as they'll have me. It is a blast.
And honestly, like, it gets bigger and better every single year. Watching the progression of conventions here in New York, I mean, looking at New York Comic Con when it started out and it was just like that bottom four, and now it's like almost the whole damn thing. Every year they get more and more of the convention AnimeNYC. I could easily see them, progressing to more and more of the Javits and just growing and evolving into something even bigger.
Oh, absolutely. I think AnimeNYC could easily do, just like New York Comic Con sort of like became the rival to San Diego Comic Con, AnimeNYC could easily become the Anime Expo rival, right? I mean, It just has so much potential. Not only is it's centrally located, so you've got a lot of publishers that come here, and also it's New York. People want to come here, so it's easier to get guests when you hold it in a town people want to come to,
Absolutely, man, absolutely. Now, you're the first straight-up translator that I've ever had on the podcast, and I want to like get what you do out there to people, because when they hear translator, they might think like, oh, so for word verbatim, but that's not necessarily what you're doing when you translate a product from Japanese into English. You're making it a product that is accessible and acceptable for an English audience. There might be a little bit lost in translation, but you're still getting the point across with what is there from Japan.
Yeah, I mean, translation is obviously one of those jobs that is highly misunderstood, because if you don't do it, you don't really know what it's like.
Right.
And what you're doing as a translator is you're attempting to capture the intent of the author and then to put that intent into English. And sometimes that means you use different words.
Right.
And, a word-for-word translation is generally a bad translation. Because that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, like, that author's like, okay, what was the emotional beat here, right? They wanted you to laugh here. They wanted you to cry here.
Right.
This is the information. This is the feeling they want to evoke. And so when you translate, you try to make sure that the English reader is getting the same experience that a Japanese reader would have had, with those same emotional beats. Whatever is going on in the story, you need to replicate that. And the thing about doing translation is that it should feel like it was originally written in English.
Right.
If you read a translation and it feels like a translation or reads like a translation, or you can tell this was translated, then that's a pretty poor translation.
And it's funny too, even watching it evolve from like the days of like when Pokemon started, and like everybody goes to that example of wow, these donuts taste really good, when it was obviously a rice ball. To today, the process has evolved and changed so much over the years to feel like a more genuine experience.
Sure, and that's just as general knowledge. I mean, that's not unusual with translation, and the way it works is that the more you know about the original culture, the less you have to translate it. Like if you go back to books written from, for example, like the 1800s, they are full of knights and fairies, because we didn't have the English words. We didn't have the word samurai, right? So samurai would have been translated as knight, and that was the fashion of the time. And people will mock the Jelly Donuts translation. And is it ridiculous? Yeah. But is it a bad translation? At the time, not really, because what
it was relatable.
Yeah, and it was once again going back to that intent of the author. What point did the onigiri serve?
Right.
Because the characters wanted to go yummy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you put in something like rice balls, American kids would have gone yucky, and that wasn't what you were trying to evoke.
I think what's the coolest thing about what you do too is like the different genres that you get to work in.
Yeah.
Because I've seen you go all the way from like the action manga to ones about freaking cats. Like you have that span and you have that depth because there are so many different varieties of manga out there that are looking to be translated, and of course that's part of your job right there.
And for me, when it comes to translating a manga, like I really love the manga that I translate. That's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. I have to be really passionate about the manga in order to do a good job.
Like to connect to it.
Yeah. I think I've tried in the past to be what I would just like sort of like be a generic translator, translates whatever's open, and I found that if I don't really love the work, I don't do as good a job to it. So I'm kind of picky as to what jobs I'll take, and if I love the comic, then I can also express that love through the translation. And, I'm a wide reader, so if I'm reading something like a biography of Hitler and something like a cat that lives with a gamer, you can find the equal joy in both of those, I think.
And let's remember, the plus is important.
The plus is important. It's cat plus gamer, not cat gamer. I put that plus there for a reason. It's supposed to look like the D-pad on an old Nintendo controller.
Tell people a little bit about that one, because I find that one the most interesting of the books that are out right now, mostly for how down-to-earth it is.
Yeah.
It's just a very simple concept, and I think also, in a way, you could say that it does evolve in, what's available now manga-wise, that we're getting more of that slice-of-life stuff that we used to get.
And that's also, that's one of those cultural things that's lost with Cat Plus Gamer, is the fact that in Japan, it's actually very rare to live with a house cat. Yeah. Most house cats are kept as outdoor pets, for the really basic reason that a lot of Japanese houses have tatami mat flooring.
Right.
And a cat will buzz through, expensive tatami mat flooring, because it's the world's largest scratchy post. So they're very rarely kept inside.
Yeah.
And so Cat Plus Gamer, not only is it, because it's mainly, that's the thing, it's there's this gamer girl who gets a cat, and the entire manga is about how weird it is to live with a cat.
Yeah.
And that is actually her experience. She started the book because she adopted a cat, and she was like, these cats are so weird, I'm going to write a comic about it.
And what better way to write about your experience than actually experiencing it?
Yeah, and it's extraordinary, it is extraordinary matter of fact. I like that too. The cat's not anthropomorphic. Yeah. That's why it's not Cat Gamer, because the cat's not doing any gaming, The cat doesn't have any personality other than the personality all cats have, and it's just so pure and fun. And also, I started working on it during quarantine, and I'm like, sometimes you just need books that are just joyful,
Right.
Like, not everything has to be serious and brutal and harsh all the time, There's got to be room in the world for a comic that does nothing but just make you happy, and that is the one that does it.
Speaking of making you happy, Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, seeing your name on a Star Wars book was pretty damn awesome, but this is specifically Star Wars. I mean, what better way to do it than Japanese and Star Wars combined as one with the Star Wars Visions, right?
So Star Wars Vision came out, and I wrote the book Art of Star Wars Visions from Dark Horse, and that was so much fun, because I got to interview all the cast, and just it was great. I mean, all the directors and everything, and what they thought when they were writing, and it was so much fun, because they are equally as big as Star Wars geeks as anyone. They loved it. It was just amazing to them that they were being given the keys to this particular kingdom, and working with them, it was so much fun, because they all had sort of the same conundrum. It's like, as a Japanese person, what can I bring to Star Wars? Star Wars is so American. I don't want to ruin it. It would literally be like getting a comic artist and say, hey, we want you to do a Miyazaki project. Do a follow-up to Porco Rosso. Do a follow-up to Princess Mononoke. You'd be like, anything I do is going to be awful.
Right.
How could I possibly conceivably do that? What could I add that is anything other than awful?
Right.
And so they all just really dove into themselves and found out, here's what I bring to the table. The Studio Trigger guys. What is unique about Studio Trigger? How can we do that in the Star Wars universe? How do we bring that up? And it was so much fun to work with them. And it was also awesome here at AnimeNYC, because I got to meet them. So
yeah. I mean, and what was that like? I mean, actually putting a face to a name.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was great. And we didn't even know at the time. We were actually sitting there talking to each other, and suddenly had the realization that these were the same people that we'd been emailing back and forth for a couple months. And it was just great. It was hilarious. And I got to hang out with them a little bit after the show, and they are just super nice people. Super nice.
And Star Wars 2 already has that Japanese influence. I mean, that's where George Lucas got his initial inspiration for a lot of the stuff was Japan. So it makes sense for that cultural exchange to go back and forth like that.
Yeah, Star Wars and Japan have had a huge and long relationship with each other, obviously. And I think it was really natural for them. And I think that when they were working on the visions, they sort of found that out for themselves. They're like, okay, there is room for Japan in Star Wars visions, or in the Star Wars universe, because George Lucas has always had that deep thread going in it, that sort of undercurrent.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting that given the option, all of them, to do any Star Wars project they wanted, none of them picked the main characters. Like, there's no Han Solo story in there. There's no Chewbacca. There's no C-3PO.
That's awesome.
They could have, but every single one was like, well, what else happened? What else? What happened off camera in Star Wars? What happened on this other planet that nobody went to visit? And
because they're nerds too. Like they're into those side characters.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Into those side characters, into those stories, and it makes you realize how vast the Star Wars universe truly is, and how many stories can be told. I think my person is here to take me to the airport.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Well, I'm glad I at least got 10 minutes of your time, man, and enjoy your trip back to the West Coast.
I will.
Let people know on the internet where they can find you.
Mostly just like I have my website, ZachDavison.com. You can find me on Twitter for as long as that lasts at Zach Davison. But pretty much just Google my name, and that's the easiest way to do it.
Awesome. Fantastic, man. Safe trip back. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Thanks so much, Ian.
All right, man. Okay, we are back here on the Sunday of AnimeNYC, and I am here with a new friend, Robert Wilson IV. The fourth is very important. You do not forget the fourth.
Critical.
How's your weekend been treating you, man?
It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. It's definitely like a lot different energy than I'm used to from your typical like comic convention, Which is actually one of the first questions that I was going to ask you, as somebody who's done both, as somebody who's done, you're here for New York Comic Con most years, now you're here for AnimeNYC. How different is the vibe between anime convention and a comic convention? Yeah, well, it's definitely like a much younger audience.
Absolutely.
And I feel like people are just more interested in seeing and trying new things.
Yes.
And so I feel like sometimes at comic shows, especially when you have a new comic that people don't know about, you really have to have like your pitch ready.
Yes, definitely.
My comic is this thing meets this thing. And man, most of these kids don't care. They're just like, oh, this looks neat.
The way that I usually put anime conventions to people when they ask is baby's first con. Because anime itself, skews younger.
Totally.
For the most part. I mean, which is funny because it's complete opposite from the 80s when it skewed older.
Yeah.
But as time has gone on, it's become the inroad. That even if they're into anime, they're also into sci-fi, they're also into, American comics or what have you.
Totally.
But they go here first because it's what they got into first.
Sure.
And then from there, they might then go to a comic convention.
Well, it's like the most accessible thing right now.
Yeah.
Like, everyone has at least a family member that has Netflix or Hulu or something.
Oh, sure,
like, there's a million anime series on all of these streaming platforms.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of ubiquitous. Whereas getting into comic books or, especially the stuff that I do, like more creator-owned comics,
right.
You've kind of got to search it out, right?
Well, I mean, what's great about what you do is, we do a previews episode every month for Comic Geek Speak, and you are what I affectionately call the back of the book. Especially with Vault. It's one of the last listings in there, but Vault always has the most interesting stuff to me because not only did they have a good layout for their previews, which I highly appreciate, but there's new and interesting stuff coming in there all the time, man. And tell them a little bit about what you have to offer.
Yeah, so I think that Vault and other publishers like Vault are really interesting right now and kind of picking up the slack left behind in the vacuum of Vertigo, you know?
Yes.
And Vault is particularly interesting to me because it is very much a product of the taste of the editor-in-chief, of Adrian.
Right.
And so I feel like there's a real perspective, even though the books are pretty diverse and pretty dissimilar, there's an interesting vibe and taste that carries through.
Sure. They do what they like, and it very much comes through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell it's not a calculation based on like what they think is going to be the most popular thing. It is clear to me, both as a reader and also having worked with them on Barbaric, the Harvest Blades, and some upcoming stuff, that it's a labor of love and an expression of a personal taste.
Absolutely. Tell them a little bit about Barbaric, because from the way you described it, that is a heck of a book right there.
Yeah. So I am the artist on Barbaric the Harvest Blades, which is a one-shot that kind of bridges Barbaric Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Nathan Gooden and Michael Morisi.
Right.
And the way I usually pitch Barbaric to people is it's kind of like Conan the Barbarian if he had Jiminy Cricket in the form of a bloodthirsty battle axe.
Okay.
And so he's cursed to only be able to harm evil people.
Right.
But his axe is the arbiter of who gets the axe or not. But the more blood axe gets, the more bloodthirsty he gets.
Okay. So kind of a similar premise, at least a little bit, to maybe like the Black Knight over at Marvel, like the like with the ebony blade and all that, like the bloodthirsty sword and what have you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like Conan the Barbarian by way of Rick and Morty type of thing.
Got it. Okay. All right. And that's a pitch right there.
Yeah, sure, totally.
What type of style do you bring to the artwork? Like, is it a very like bombastic style, or is it a little bit more like knightly? Like what? How would you describe it?
I almost don't know how to describe my art style anymore because it's such a like melting pot of my different interests, right? Like I'm very much a child of like Jim Lee artistically. So under the surface, like you boil it down, and I'm a kid who like copied X-Men and Wildcats issues ad nauseum, right?
Yeah.
But like I love brushy inking. I love Love and Rockets. I love Becky Cloonan. I love manga so much, and so it all kind of gets mixed in there. And yeah, I would hope that my work is flexible enough to where I can communicate like really subtle, quiet emotions.
Yeah.
And also, when I need to draw a barbarian cleaving a giant bat monster in half with a sentient axe, like I can do that.
You channel your Spawn reading days, and you're like, okay, been there, done that.
Absolutely.
And that love of manga comes through, obviously, here at AnimeNYC, which may very well connect you to the audience itself, because you yourself having a love of all things Japanese certainly assists with the crowd and the concept.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel as at home here as I feel at New York Comic Con or what have you.
Yeah.
I'm talking about different stuff, but it's like, man, I love Gundam to a ridiculous amount. I love Berserk to a ridiculous amount. So it's like, I'm very comfortable here.
Now you're from the Midwest, correct?
Yeah, kind of all over the place. I live in Oklahoma City right now.
Okay, so I assume you do conventions there. Like, I'd love to see like the comparison between a convention there versus the insanity of a convention here.
Yeah.
Because this has to be like triple the size. At least I'm thinking in my head.
Triple, buddy. So my local convention is New World Comic Con in Oklahoma City. It's in July.
Okay.
I'm actually helping bring artists out for Artist Alley.
Oh, very
and
cool.
It's run by a comic shop. It's very much a homebrew convention. And last year we had about 4,000 attendees.
Nice.
Which is really great
absolutely.
for a young event in a medium to small size city.
Right.
But you do compare that to something like New York Comic Con that has like 200,000 attendees.
Yeah.
It's
and 4,000 people in the event space,
exactly.
like for the main event.
It's orders of magnitude larger in New York City.
Significantly.
But I feel like every city that I've gone to for a convention has something interesting and different to offer.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of my favorite part about traveling to different shows is getting to know
crowds, like
the local personality, getting to try different foods. I love asking people, like, I've got 3 nights in town, where do I eat? You know?
My God. I would have trouble answering that here because there's too much.
Oh, absolutely. Like, coming to New York just for a convention weekend kind of hurts.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't leave this convention space until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night.
Totally, yeah.
So I only get, like, one meal out on the town.
Right. That's why I'm so glad we were able to head to at least like Bronx and like have you have at least one of the local experiences that incredibly local to that on freaking opening night. So I'm glad you got to have at least one of those while you were here. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about some of your other work. I know that there's some upcoming stuff we can't discuss right now, but what's come out and what else can you pin?
Yeah. So if you want to check out more of my work, I would say the two best and most accessible things to check out would be Heartthrob from Oni Press, which I co-created with Christopher Sabella and Nick Filardi.
Those are two great names right there.
I love them. I love those guys like brothers. They're fantastic at what they do. And I really love Heartthrob. I think it's a real unique thing in the comic industry, like crime, romance, a little slice of life. And then I did an issue in Bitch Planet Volume 1, so right in the middle of Volume 1.
Sitting on my shelf, so yeah. Nicely done. Now with Heartthrob, I mean, Oni does tend to skew very Japanese with a decent amount of its stuff.
Sure.
Like, how Japanese did you skew necessarily? Like, intentionally or not?
You know, story-wise and aesthetically, I would say it's not very Japanese influenced at all. It's very it's set in the 70s, like lots of Fleetwood Mac in there.
Awesome. You're speaking my language.
Yeah, and so at its heart, it's a story about like a fling that turns into a relationship that turns into a heartbreak.
Yeah.
And so for me, the manga influence in there is going to be like reaching outside of normal genre boundaries.
Yeah.
And also some of my storytelling stuff, like the way I construct a comic page. I can't help but be influenced by creators like Naoki Urasawa.
Of course, yeah, because that's your fave. So of course, fave. Sure. That's it. Let the people know out there where they can find your work.
You can find my website and link to all my social at robertwilsoniv.com and any social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, if it still exists, Robert Wilson IV.
Nice. Remember, the 4 is important.
The 4 is critical.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for joining us, man. It's been a pleasure. And enjoy the last, let's see, what time is it now?
15 minutes?
Yeah, the last, half hour of the convention before things wrap up. I keep thinking to myself, it wraps at 4. That's the worst part of a Sunday, Because, I want this shit to run, until 6 or 7, but I know people got to get home. So what are you going to do? Safe trip back, and good talking to you, man.
Thank you so much. It was great chatting.
All right, fantastic. More than likely, this mic will come on at least one more time today, but if not, you've heard enough. So, you're going to hear about a 20-minute piece that I recorded with Jamal Eigel and Donovan Morgan Grant on the floor of this year's New York Comic Con. New York Comic Con was October 12th through 15th, 2023. Those of you who listened to last year's con wrap-up know that last year I only got to go for a day and a quarter because I had a wedding to go to in Boston. This time around, I was there for all 4 days of the con. I did not get up super early for any of the days because I just don't do that. But I was there for all 4 days, and I had an amazing time. New York Comic Con is, ginormous. 200,000 people in a 4-day period jamming themselves into the Javits Center. It's a lot better now that the North Extension is being utilized more. They also have extra convention space where the main exhibitor hall actually extends into the North area. The first year that they had Javits North available to them, they didn't do that. And since then, they have utilized that space, which allows them to get, further dealers on the floor, whether it be, comic vendors or whether it be small press or T-shirt vendors or anime guys or whatever. They have the ability to now extend all the way over into Javits North. The good thing is that if you're going to a panel, chances are it's probably happening at Javits North. So if you're at that end of the hall or you plan to be at that end of the hall, you can just walk right out and you're there. If you're planning on going to a panel and you're all the way at the 100s on the other side of Javits, you better save yourself a solid 20 minutes because you have a long walk ahead of you, my friend. The Javits is ginormous, and the layout does not make it work very well for that. There are still a couple of panels that happen inside the main Javits structure, but those are few and far between at this point, and most of those rooms that used to be panel rooms are being used either for display purposes, for specific companies that want to have their own room so they can, run their interviews or take you on a tour of everything they have to offer or what have you, and some of which are being utilized just for storage space or pop-up events that are happening for kids and stuff like that might be happening in those rooms. That used to be the case. There was also a dedicated gaming space, which is kind of like a mini version of PAX Unplugged, a very, very mini version. That's all the way over, not too far from where the main stage is. It was actually pretty awesome. I sat myself down on the Sunday and painted a full miniature for free. They gave you the paints, and you went to town and you painted yourself a miniature, and you got to take that home. I am a horrible artist, but I managed to not mess up that badly, and I even got some various tones of color on the rim of the jacket of the character that I was making, and painted the sword, and actually looked pretty badass. But they have that on display, but also some games and stuff like that. You could sit down and play your own games. They had some dedicated chair spaces available for that in that same area of the con. And then, of course, there was the main dealer space. Now, as usual, the main dealer space was ginormous, and Bandai, I think, had probably the biggest presence on the floor. Not just because they had a giant inflatable Goku, but they had like 3 booths total for their toys, for their manga, and for their anime, all set up there. For some reason, DoorDash had a booth. Don't ask me why, but they did. Marvel had their usual stage area, and they're over in center-ish, and they have always had that presence, except for 1 year that they didn't. I think during COVID they didn't actually set up in the same fashion, but ever since then they've been back. DC still does not have a booth. We'll get into a little bit of the I wouldn't quite say turmoil, but get into the dearth of publishers that actually set up on the floor when I'm talking to Jamal and Donovan. But yeah, not a lot of the mid-range guys were there. Image did not have a booth. Neither did Skybound as part of Image. There have been years where they were set up. This was not the case. Boom was not there either, and it was kind of noticed. There were tons of people set up selling comics of these publishers, but the publishers were not actually there. Yes, there were smaller publishers, and that's great to see, as it always is. It's just when your bigwigs don't show up, it's kind of a mixed message. I love New York Comic Con. I love that New York Comic Con still feels like a actual comic convention to me. But if you don't have the publisher presence, that kind of gets lost in the crowd a little bit. And one thing that I definitely need to mention that happened for the first time this year on Thursday of New York Comic Con was the professional summit that they held after hours at the convention. After the exhibit hall closed, and about an hour before the artist alley closed, and frankly, the artist alley is open late enough where most artists wind up closing shop about an hour beforehand anyway, everybody who was either an exhibitor, professional, artist, or press had access to this professional after-hours thingamabooby that took place. It was basically a giant mixer, and it played out that way, whether they intended it to or not, mostly because even though there were panels taking place at this thing, you could not hear a word that anybody was saying. The way that they had the actual microphones set up, the speakers were nowhere near loud enough in order to combat the room noise. And this was held in the Crystal Pavilion at the Javits, which is all the way upstairs in the main hall. So once upon a time, Artist Alley was actually held up in the Crystal Pavilion. Luckily, they have not done that in many years. But this was back when they still had Podcast Arena. So I was actually set up around the Crystal Pavilion for my table in the Podcast Arena back when that was still a thing. I think it was year 2 of New York Comic Con many, many years ago. They've long since abandoned that. So this year, it was mostly used for cosplay purposes. There was also a gaming area set up where you could sit down and, do tabletop and stuff like that. And there was also a lounge that was sort of the secondary lounge. It was the professional lounge / press lounge, if you wanted to make it that, because the actual press lounge, which was all the way over in Javits North, and it was a pain in the ass to get there. Anywho, back to the actual shindig. They had some food set up. They had some hot dogs that were basically dirty water dogs set up in the corner. There was also some Chinese food and some Mexican food set up, and they had some free drinks that you could go ahead and sample, which were essentially make your own shandies, because they would hand you whatever beer they had on hand and a Sprite, and you could go ahead and make yourself a shandy out of that and then go nuts. They also had some wines and, various other accoutrements that you could sample. But yeah, it was essentially just a mixer. I wish I would have been able to hear the actual panels that were taking place, because they had a couple of retailers set up doing their state on the industry. Also, Tom Taylor did have a speech that I could not hear for the most part. The only real moment that I did hear was when Tom King came up and pretended to be Tom Taylor, because everybody always mistakes Tom Taylor for Tom King, even though Tom King is very much from the U.S. and Tom Taylor is very much not. But that was the funniest part of the entire thing. Next year, I hope that they either have it in a room that has better sound isolation where we'll actually be able to hear what they're saying, or they just tell everybody to shut the heck up so that we can understand what's taking place. But it was a nice touch for Thursday night. I'm glad I stayed for it. I got to hang out with Jamal Igle and Gene Ha, for that matter. Gene Ha, sweetheart of a human being. This is the most I've actually gotten the opportunity to talk to him. And gentle soul. Lovely, lovely man. So happy that I got to spend some time just getting to know him a little bit better at this event. And, he sat down with me, Jamal, and Chris. And there were a couple other people that mingled here and there, as the night went on. But overall, it was a pleasant experience. Once again, just hope that we're actually able to hear the speakers a little bit better if they decide to do this again in 2024, which I'm sure they probably will, because it seemed like it was a pretty big success. That same room is where the Harvey Awards took place the next night. And we go into the Harvey Awards a bit more when I'm talking to Jamal on the pre-record that I did. But I just want to touch on some of the award winners this time around for the Harveys, along with the Hall of Fame inductees, which, again, we discuss a little bit further in depth with Jamal. There were the winners, and I want to give them their time of day here, even if it's been about a month since it took place. Book of the Year went to Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sand by Kate Beaton. Other nominees included Acting Class, Follow Me Down, a Reckless book by Brubaker and Phillips. Obviously, Chris Eberle's choice there. Girl Juice, It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth. Little Monsters Volume 1 by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. Man in the Macintosh Suit, Mimosa, Public Domain Volume 1, and Who Will Make the Pancakes, I think was probably the best name for a book up for the award for Book of the Year this time around, as I absolutely love that title. Digital Book of the Year went to Lore Olympics by Rachel Smythe of Webtoons. That went up against Scott Snyder and Tula Latay's Barnstormers, Deeply Dave by Grover, Everything is Fine by Mike Burchell, and Ripple Effects by Jordan Hart, and various others. Best Children's or Young Adult Book went to Hungry Ghost by Victoria Ying. She was up against Clementine Fox and the Great Island Adventure by Lei Luna, a Dungeons and Dragons book by Molly Knox Ulstertang, Frizzy by Clarabelle Ortega, In Limbo by Deb Lee, and North Ranger by Ray Terciero and Bray Indigo. Best manga went to Chainsaw Man. No shock there. It's won the past couple of years. One of the nominees was Cat Plus Gamer, which I mentioned when talking to Zach Davison at AnimeNYC. So nice to see that he got a nomination here, along with Goodbye Eri by Tatsuki Fujimoto and Shuna's Journey by Hayao Miyazaki and Spy X Family by Tatsuya Endo. I was kind of rooting for Shuna's Journey in this one just because it was a Miyazaki, but it went to Chainsaw Man because Chainsaw Man is the thing that all the kiddies be talking about right now. It is very much huge. Best International Book went to Black Sad, They All Fall Down Part 1. Not its first award, to say the least. Other nominees, Alice on the Run, One Child's Journey Through the Rwandan Civil War, Always Never by Jordi Lefebvre, Ashes by Olivara Ortiz, The Extraordinary Part, Book 1, Orsay's Hands, and Tiki, A Very Rough Year. Best Adaptation went to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. That was nice to see. And we even got Miles' voice actor accepting the award as he was on hand at the con. So it was nice to see Shamik Moore come up there and accept the award on behalf of the cast and crew. That was pretty awesome. Other nominees in this were American Born Chinese on Disney+, Drops of God on Apple TV, Moon Knight, Disney+, Nimona from Netflix, The Sandman from Netflix, She-Hulk, Disney+, The Stuff of Legends, the board game, the only board game on the list there, Sweet Tooth Season 2, and Wednesday. And unlike the Eisner Awards, there really aren't a lot of categories presented for the Harvey Awards. But as stated, there were Hall of Fame entries by Chris Claremont, Walt Simonson, Wheezy Simonson, Mark Wolfman, George Perez, and Bill Griffith on hand. Yeah, it was a great experience. I really enjoyed myself. Hope I get to experience it again. This was the first Harvey's I'd been to since the move to New York. I've been to a bunch at Baltimore before, and it was a very different experience then. It was at a separate ballroom at one of the hotels, and this one was once again in the Crystal Pavilion. But had a great time and really enjoyed being able to see all these awards be handed out. I didn't go to a lot of panels this year. In years past, I went to many more, but this year it just, for some reason, just didn't manifest, and that's perfectly fine. One of the panels that I did get to go to was the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off panel, which was great. That was in the main stage. And even though you need to register for these things ahead of time, there's always a standby line. And 9 times out of 10, if you queue up with enough time to spare, like say an hour before a main event panel is going to wind up happening, you're going to get in. And that's exactly what we did. We got there about an hour before, and then we sat ourselves down and we got to see everything that was previewed for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. They played a scene from the upcoming anime. We were the first ones to see the new opening credits, which are now available on YouTube. They showed us a couple of teasers and stuff like that, and went into some further details on the show. I cannot wait to check that out. I'm a huge Scott Pilgrim fan, and the fact that they got the entire cast back for this anime is just beyond amazing. Some of the other things that I got to do at the con, we did see a Death Note the musical panel, which I go into a little bit in my conversation with Donovan, but there was a professional production of Death Note the musical in London recently, and they played a bunch of the songs from it, and we got to experience that. There were some live performances, there were some recorded performances, and really we got to know the show pretty well. I actually think this thing might have legs. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a Death Note musical rendition either off Broadway or close to it sometime in the not too distant future. I think it really has the potential for that. This is the official adaptation of the original Japanese version. And I mean, they brought out a cast member from freaking Moulin Rouge on Broadway in order to perform one of the songs, and it was outstanding. They had some of the other cast members from this UK edition of it fly in. When you get an original cast member of Rent involved with your production, that's probably a good sign, and that's what they did for the UK version. Playing Ryuk was Adam Pascal, one of the original cast members of Rent, and we got to hear his performance. They played one of the tracks that he was involved with, and it was really great. So look, I mean, if you've made movies out of Death Note, and you've made anime out of Death Note, you made manga out of Death Note, I think you could probably also get away with a musical, and they got away with it. I think they did a really, really good job with what they presented. Thinking a little bit further on people that I ran into at the show and people that I got to talk to for a little while, I did get to finally run into, for the first time in a couple of years, Vince B. and David Price from 11 O'Clock Comics. Those of you who have been listening to me podcast for many years now know that David Price was one of my original co-hosts for Comic Timing, and also one of the first people that I met in the Comic Geek Speak community. Him and I drove with Bruce Rosenberger over to the Fairgrounds Mall to see Comic Geek Speak episode 100 in person. And I've known David ever since. You know, we've been close enough on social media and what have you. And, you know, I still listen to 11 O'Clock Comics from time to time as well, and got to talk to them for a bit, and it was great to catch up. Dave Wachter was set up on the floor for this particular convention, and Dave is a wonderful human being, and it's great to see somebody who has deep CGS roots like that succeeding the way that he's succeeding right now. Obviously, he recently worked on Shang-Chi over at Marvel, and now he's working on The Punisher, the new version of The Punisher that just launched a little while ago. He's doing a great job on that so far. I got to talk to Jim Zub for a bit, and I talked to him after we got to see a live play of the Marvel RPG that just got released a little while ago. They did a full run through with dice and all of the new Marvel RPG game, Marvel Multiverse, and you know, everybody played a different character. She-Hulk was involved. It was Beast and a couple of others. But Jim Zub was one of the main players in it. And I got to head to his booth, and I finally bought the Rick and Morty Dungeons & Dragons collection, which includes both stories that Jim worked on and Patrick Rothfuss, who I know not only as a writer, but also as a cast member for many years in the Acquisitions Incorporated D&D live play that Penny Arcade has been putting on at their PAX events for many years. And Patrick Rothfuss has deep ties into D&D, and he worked on the Dungeons & Dragons book as well. Got to say hi to Kyle Higgins on the floor, and bought myself 2 more volumes of Radiant Black when I did so. Kyle was a busy man, and if I remember correctly, I think I may have gotten one of the last volumes of, I think, volume 3, if I'm remembering correctly. But either way, I got volumes 3 and 4, so now I have volumes 1 through 4 of Radiant Black to read through, and I cannot wait to do so. Jeremy Adams was on the floor, and Jeremy Adams is an awesome human being. I hope to have him on the show at some point. I'd love to just sit down and interview him, and, you know, just get to shoot the shit with him, because we did that while I was walking around with Tim Sheridan, who's currently working on the Alan Scott book over at DC Comics. So I had a Green Lantern encounter all around, and we talked for a bit, and it was really great to catch up for a little while there. And I, of course, couldn't pass up the opportunity to talk to good old Uncle Sal on the floor. He, of course, was holding court when I got there, so I waited patiently, and then once he was done talking to the people he was talking to, I maneuvered myself in, and we had a solid 20-minute-long conversation, which included how he cuts the line at cats, or at least tries to. Just slip him a 20. That's all it takes. But, yeah, it's always just a thrill to talk to Sal. He's the biggest sweetheart in the biz. I mean, yeah, sure, he might curse, but he's such a lovely human being. I love every minute of it. Nobody makes me laugh harder than him, and it was great to just catch up with him for at least a little while before heading off. I think I had a panel to go to, if I remember correctly, that I had to run off to at that time. But we hope to have him back on the show sooner than later, and hopefully it is indeed sooner, because we have a lot to catch up on, and I have a lot to laugh at. Obviously, I was walking around with friend of the show, Chris Nautis, for a decent amount of the time that I was there, plus a couple other friends of mine. My friend David, who I had on our New York Comic Con 2021 episode, if I'm remembering that correctly. Walked around with him for a bit, and we had a great time. Yeah, just overall, it was a really good experience at the con. It always is, but it's great to see that New York Comic Con itself still has legs after all these years. So anyway, I've been rambling for way too long, so I'm going to end it here and lead you to the New York Comic Con segment with Jamal and Donovan Morgan Grant. All right, finally turning on the recorder for very good reason here on Sunday, as I'm in person with a man I have podcasted with many a time before and only met for about 17 seconds last year in person, Mr. Donovan Morgan Grant. Donovan, a pleasure to see you in the flesh.
Haha, yes, it's great to see you too, again, for more than those 17 seconds.
Exactly, man. So you're no longer a New York Comic Con virgin. This is your second time here. How does second time compare to first?
It's interesting because, like, in terms of like my freelance gig, I've kind of advanced a bit.
Yeah.
So now these kinds of cons are a bit more of a money incentive, but at the same time, as I was just telling you a minute ago, I still get to like nerd out on actually like casually going around talking to the people that I respect.
I love you, please sign this.
I know, and like my experience has always been like 90% of the time, all the creators are like mega cool.
Oh yeah,
mega cool. So between that, the cosplay, especially after COVID, I've just noticed more kind of like cross cosplay. You know, you have your classic like male jubilees and such. You got your like like Panthers, just but all the kinds of like different kinds of people, different kinds of characters, especially once the movies are out. You know, you got your Spider-Man Indias and your Miguel's and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That to me, like the fandom really just attracts me now more than ever. That's really cool to see here in New York.
Oh no, absolutely, dude. My favorite thing about this con is that there's always so much variety and so many different things you can do and see, and there really still is something for everybody, even as like it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger.
Do you? So this is news to me. I learned this weekend.
Yeah.
So in the last few years, NYCC has overtaken SCCC in terms of like population.
It's gotten there, yeah. Because San Diego Comic Con has a very set attendance because of the amount of room they have, and now that Javits North exists, they were able to expand into that and allow more people in. Okay. So I think that's why, like in general, I think there's more square footage here than there is in San Diego, which allows them to have a bigger crowd.
It does make sense because like you have up to like 5 floors up here.
Exactly.
San Diego's like maybe 4, really 3. Like it's wild. It is wild, and it's cool because like it's a different experience for me. I was going to San Diego for up to 10 years.
Yeah.
This is my second year here. I don't really place the value that so and so is better, but like it is not. There's not a drop off at all. No, there isn't. Yeah, and I mean, I loved San Diego the 2 times that I was there. Mind you, I haven't been there since 2009. Dear God, that was forever ago at this point. But what I hear about this past year is that it became more of a comic convention again, almost by accident, you know, because the fact that there weren't nearly as many writers and actors that could attend due to the strike. So they kind of had to become a Comic-Con again. That's exactly the thing. I actually wrote a piece about that for San Diego a few months back. And for here, now that the writer's strike is over with, but the actor's strike is still going on, you're seeing folks, like big-time actors here for signings. and when they have spotlight panels, I don't know what they're doing.
David Tennant literally talked about Shakespeare, his favorite foods, and he could like mention things but not actually promote them, essentially. So like if it came up in passing, that's fine, but if he was specifically promoting it, that's a no-no. So that's what most of the spotlight panels wound up becoming.
So do you think, let me know if you have a feel for this.
Yeah.
Because for San Diego, I was interviewing artists in Artist Alley about how they felt, and they thought it was a net positive.
Oh, yeah.
People weren't in line waiting for Hall H because their Hollywood wasn't there.
Right.
So they genuinely spent more time with the comics and the comic people. Do you have that sense here for New York?
I think that there's a little bit more of a balance here than there used to be. Even just looking at the Artist Alley, for that matter. There's a lot less of the I'm a big star and I'm going to take up 4 booths situation this time around, at least from what I've observed. In previous years, like last year, I mean, like Webtoon had like that entire like aisle devoted entirely to them, and it seems like there's a little bit less of that this time. I mean, there's artist collectives, but it seems like everybody just has one table rather than taking up 3 if you're a famous schmamous type of person. At the same time, even upstairs, there's more aisle space, there's fewer booths, which can be a net positive or a net negative.
I didn't know there was fewer booths.
There's definitely fewer booths because like Image isn't here, Boom's not here, DC's not here. They weren't here last year either.
DC's not here last year.
It just feels like there's a little bit more room to breathe, but also there's more variety in what you find. Less sellers though, so like less like comic book retailers.
I have noticed that. I was talking to my friend Josh, who I'm room with, like because San Diego just a few months ago. I was like, oh well, even though New York Comic Con is like bigger in population, it does seem that it has less like certain booths and stuff. In regards to like that kind of the space utilization.
Right.
Because I'm still kind of like understanding like the vibe of it.
Oh sure,
And so and again, it's not a value statement. It's just kind of like noticing how, especially in the post-COVID, especially in this particular like moment in time with the strikes and stuff.
Right.
How these like franchises and companies and stuff are kind of navigating all of that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very tightrope to walk, and I wonder what it's going to be like next year when the actors are back, one way or the other, like strike-wise, because frankly, the industry will be over if it lasts any longer. There's only so many Korean dramas you can air on Netflix. That's the way it rolls. But what have you been up to panel-wise and just like event-wise here?
First row seats to the Dragon Ball panel.
Nice. Yes, I know. Because I didn't find out until later in the day, and I'm like, there's a new Dragon Ball show? What the hell?
Babies!
I mean, you're not far from the truth, dude. It's like, it's GT, the next generation.
Yes, it is. My favorite part about that was just going back to my hotel room that night and just reading all the salt.
Oh my God.
It was genuinely hilarious.
It's like, he's a kid again? Wait, Vegeta's a kid?
They're all kids. That was fun. I was in the like the Monarch show on Apple TV, the Godzilla.
Yeah.
I was in that panel. I saw like the whole first episode. That's like Wyatt Russell and Kurt Russell playing the same character at different points in their lives.
How was that?
I thought it was interesting. I've only seen like Godzilla vs. Kong. I'm not familiar with that whole continuity.
Right.
But I thought it was still, because most of the characters actually are like Japanese.
Right.
Or at least they hail from Japan. So like it was a lot of characters and a lot of different timelines. And I was entertained.
Nice.
I was in that yesterday. I kind of like derped into a Steve Ditko panel with his family.
Accidental Steve Ditko panel?
Yeah.
That's a thing that exists?
I was like, what floor is this? Oh, it's only around for 5 minutes. And like he had his nieces and nephews talking about it.
Oh, nice.
And that was super cool because there was a lot of demythologization.
Okay.
Like he wasn't a recluse.
Yes.
He wasn't like a hardcore objectivist. He wasn't like he wasn't like this crazy person that people want him to be.
Zach Crucy wrote an excellent book on Steve Ditko that you should definitely check out. We had him on CGS a couple of years back talking about it also, and it really did go into a lot of the minutia that you're discussing, that he wasn't a recluse, that he didn't leave Spider-Man because Stan Lee decided to reveal who the Green Goblin was. That was his decision, not Stan's. Like, a lot of the myths are not really true about the man.
Yeah, exactly. And they were mentioning that, like, the family really wants to couple up together a documentary.
Yeah.
And I think in the age of, like, Batman, Bill and Batman documentary, that should be simple to do.
Right.
So, in terms of, like, the kind of fan panels, that might be my favorite.
Nice.
Especially because I didn't know that was happening, and it was just I'm here for that kind of content. I'm here for that kind of like these are the people and this is their creativity kind of thing.
Did you know that Death Note the musical was a thing?
No.
Did you know that I went to the panel for it yesterday at 9 p.m. and got to see live performances of the Death Note, the musical songs that were performed in London? Yeah, dude, no, for real. Death Note the musical is a thing. I'm like, at the same time, like, we're standing in front of Jamal Igo's booth, and he's going to get talked to next, but, like, he's looking at us like, are you effing kidding me right now? And, like, yes,
somebody else told me about it, or the Death Note musical, and I was just questioned people's sanity, but then I remembered there was a Jerry Springer musical that played on the West End for years and years and years.
That is very true, and I think it was even off-Broadway here at New York at one point.
Last year, I saw the Office musical.
Oh, yeah, the Office musical parody, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that might even still be on Off-Broadway, to be honest with you. But
yeah.
One of the original members of Rent played Ryuk. Adam Pascal played Ryuk.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and they have a live cast recording of it that's going to be available online shortly.
I imagine that like they got the copyright for that because it's like.
No, it's official. It was in Japan originally, and this was the first English production of it, where they basically translated it and rewrote the songs and like made it a whole thing. And it was really good.
Okay, on a scale of like Stop the Planet of the Apes, I Want to Get Off, or like Spider-Man the Musical, like where were we at?
Well, first off, nothing will ever beat Planet of the Apes the Musical, okay? Dr. Zaius. What's wrong with me? I think you're crazy. Need a second opinion, you're also lazy. This is closer to Back to the Future the Musical, I'd say, which I enjoyed immensely, and this may actually have like the ability to be off-Broadway and not be a joke.
I want to see this.
The performances were amazing. They even had like one of the performers from Moulin Rouge performing one of the songs live.
I can't believe this is happening.
This was sponsored by Playbill, dude.
I know no knowledge until just now.
If you go up to the Playbill booth before you're said and done, they have merchandise from it, and they have like mailers and stuff like that you can look at.
So do you know it's going to tell like the whole?
They're trying to tell the whole story in 2.5 hours, which is impossible to do, but I'm sure
I'm sure they'll skip like the businessman arc or whatever.
Oh yeah. But it might still have like some of the general story beats of like, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen or read Death Note, but like someone's probably going to die mid-act, and then the new investigators come in. So I wouldn't be surprised about that.
Yeah, like characters with lighter hair by the end of the series.
Exactly. But it was outstanding, man. That was easily my favorite thing I've been to at the con so far.
I really wish, because like the idea is hilarious, but like genuinely, I really wish I was.
Yeah, and it was quite literally at 9 p.m. So like it was a 3/4 full room, but you could tell it was like all the people that had just barely survived all day. In order to make it that long, but it was well worth it.
It seems to go back and forth because you had, of course, the manga and the anime, and I know that Japan did like a couple of like live action movies.
Yes.
Of course, the Netflix movie, which I hated, but like let's go back again with this musical, which sounds really cool.
It sounded awesome. Definitely check out the cast recording when it's all said and done, man. But like, do you see yourself coming back for year 3?
I would like to. I would honestly, because of. I freelance for DC.
Yeah.
I've done work for Popverse. I did a lot of work for Popverse in San Diego. And I really like coming here and doing that kind of work, but like I also am trying to figure out in that space what kind of work do I want to do.
Sure.
I've done plenty of interviews. I've done plenty of covering panels.
Yeah.
I also really like the longer, pretentious pieces. Like, like the whole, I did an article, like I mentioned, about Hollywood not being there for San Diego.
Right.
And that kind of stuff is, especially because Popverse is, sponsored by Reed Pop, which runs this thing.
Of course.
Some of their needs are a little bit more particular than others.
Right.
Let's say that, like, if all things being equal, yes, I would.
Yeah.
I would very much like to do more work in terms of like what I have done in the past.
Yeah.
That should, between now and then, that should be like impossible to figure out.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. And plus, like you said, at this point, in some ways, this has eclipsed SDCC. Nothing will ever eclipse SDCC in like the public eye, because that's what people think of when they think of Comic-Con.
Yeah.
But with events and just experience, this is the East Coast version. And there ain't nothing that's going to eclipse it, because it's New York, plain and simple.
No dog dude is going to keep you away.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah. I'm sure it'll probably come up at least one more time while discussing this convention, but at some point on Friday, I believe it was Friday, someone took a dump upstairs. We think it was a dog. We hope it was a dog. Still, what the F?
It was like as it was closing, right?
Yes, as it was closing. So yeah, like maybe a dog couldn't hold it any longer, and that's the way it goes, man.
My only question is, whatever happened to shame?
Shame doesn't exist anymore, man. Shame does. No, it does not. Trust me. As someone who rides the New York City subway on a regular basis, shame does not exist, and it hasn't for quite some time, man.
Shout out to Raph, who's not here. Shout out to Brandon and Brent.
Yep.
And is Chris still here?
Chris is going to be here later today, but she's not here at this very particular moment.
Oh, yeah.
No, shout out to everybody. And Raph will hopefully be back here next year, knock on wood. We shall see. But either way, man, pleasure to talk to you for more than 5 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Glad that didn't happen this year. Give your usual socials and all that jazz. And
every time whenever we record it, Comic Timing, I'm with Ian and the other guys.
Yep.
My main gig is the podcast Questions We Don't Have Answers that I co-host with Harrison Chute on KinoWenches.com. I write for DC.
Yep.
I've written for PopVerse.com.
Yep.
DonoDMG is my Twitter handle.
Yep.
And that's all the relevant news you need.
And you need a blue sky because seriously.
Yeah. Well, I have Threads. Is one of Threads?
What's
on Threads?
All right, Threads I may get to eventually, but I feel like there's too many, man. There's too many that keep.
No, I like that was kind of like, okay, I guess. I don't really care.
I know. All right, man, a pleasure as always, and I'm quite literally going to move my microphone over ever so slightly. Oh, hi, Jamal.
Hi.
A pleasure as always, Mr. Eigel, to have you on microphone, whether you want to or not.
Thank you, Mr. Levinstein. I appreciate the interest in my work.
Congratulations on surviving to Sunday at New York Comic Con.
Oh, good Lord. Yes, it is Sunday. It is, what time is it now? It is 12:35.
Yeah.
I am here. I'm still here.
You are still here. You're not standing, you're sitting, but you're still here.
No, I'm still, well, I was standing because I had to go and get food because I didn't eat breakfast this morning.
And breakfast is the very most important meal of the day, even if it's lunch.
That's what they told me. I don't know if I necessarily believe it, but I'm going to go with it. It seems to be the thing.
Good.
So, no, I'm here.
Yes.
I'm awake. It was a very good night last night, but I had an old man moment.
Oh, no. What happened?
So we have new upstairs neighbors.
Okay.
And they're two young ladies, and they seem like very nice young ladies, and one of them had a birthday.
Yes.
And they were playing music very loudly.
Oh, no.
At 2:15 in the morning.
Oh, no, that bad.
So I had to put on my sweats and go upstairs.
Did you grab your cane and your eye patch at the same time?
As I'm going upstairs, it's like, this isn't me. I was the one who was making the noise. Now I'm complaining about the noise. This isn't me. And they were very nice about it, though. They did turn down the music. I got back into bed. My wife was like, "Did you use your growly voice?" I was like, "No." They as soon as they opened the door, they realized their mistake. As I was drowsily staring at my upstairs neighbor, just like, could you just turn it down?
Yeah. It's like, I've been at a convention for the past couple of days, and I need at least a solid 4 hours sleep in order to be functional. Can you please keep it down?
So they were, like I said, they were very nice about it.
Good. I appreciate it. And in general, how has your weekend been here at the New York Comic Cons?
It's been good. It's interesting.
Okay.
The energy of the convention is very high.
Yes.
But it feels different than previous years. And I haven't quite really been able to, pinpoint it yet. After a couple of days of reflection, I'll probably be able to, figure out exactly what it is that just kind of feels a little, not off, but just different.
Do you feel like that's sort of like the process of returning back to quote unquote normalcy of the convention, or is it forever changed? That's the question.
I think it's probably the change. I mean, the return to normalcy happened at last year's show.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more of that. And again, the crowds are here. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the problems probably is that it's a very expensive convention to attend.
Yes.
If you're just an average fan, if you're trying to find something for your family to do, I mean, it is close to San Diego level expensive.
Oh, definitely.
So I understand a lot of people's hesitancy, and they're definitely like looking for bargains or as much free things as they could possibly get their hands on to make it equitable. You know, for a lot of independents, for a lot of independent creators, that might be a little bit of a problem because they're trying to not just like get the word out about their work, but they need to recoup the cost for the table and everything else.
Well, and not to mention the fact that, like, I mean, Chris and I were talking about this yesterday and in the previous days, that when you have eBay quite literally set directly up next to Funko, like, that's kind of giving an idea of the type of con that Reed may unintentionally or intentionally be driving towards, which is it's a buy and resell type of experience rather than just buy an experience.
Well, I think it's that. It's also the lack of publishers that are here. I mean, I only saw IDW, Archie, and Marvel. Like the big publishers. I haven't seen like
and IDW's down here.
Yeah, the IDW's on the Artist Alley floor. So I think that's part of it. I think the actor strike's still going. That's part of it as well. Yeah. The media companies count on conventions like these to get the word out about their shows, but they can't have their actors can't promote the shows because they're on strike.
Sure.
And the ones who did make the trip still. I mean, it's a good experience, but I think it's a different experience than what a lot of people were hoping to get out of coming to New York Comic Con.
No, absolutely. I mean, at least one of the things that reminded us that comics exist, though, was that you and I got to experience the Harvey Awards in a exclusive club. I was Jamal's +1. I'm officially changing my name to +1. We decided that while we were there. That way I can get into any show that I need to. Donovan, consider that as well, changing your name to +1 so that you can get into anything as a +1. That's the way to roll. But, I mean, it was actually a really awesome experience.
The Harvey Awards were great, and the food was really good. I was happily surprised about that.
Endless hors d'oeuvres. Endless hors d'oeuvres and white wine, baby.
A good time was had by all.
Yeah, especially by Chris Claremont, who clearly had a few. Claremont had a great speech, at times kind of forgetting names, not for any other reason other than the fact that it looked like he had a few. So.
Well, we didn't quite verge into Onion Belt territory, but it was getting close.
Yeah. Well, Onion Belt, Simpsons, get the reference. But Walt and Wheezy both got Hall of Fame awards.
Marv Wolfman and George Perez. It was wonderful. Bill Griffith, Exhibit Pinhead also. Although I think Art Spiegelman's speech went on just a little bit too. Just a little bit. I
mean, especially as a canned speech and whatnot. So it goes.
Exactly. But I had a great time. I think they did really, really well, and they did a good job moving the ceremony along fairly quickly, even with the slightly rambling additions.
Definitely. And I mean, for that matter, I mean, I guess the important question is, since you referenced it, where do you see the con going from here? I mean, not only in your opinion, but just in general. Like, where do you see it going in future years?
Well, I would imagine that because they're starting to build more hotels over on this side of the city, I would imagine that in future years, like San Diego, the con will expand more into this part of more of the west side of the city as more space opens up. I think that's really been sort of like a detriment that they've had to overcome, is just the lack of space. The addition of the new building helped a lot, although I still kind of miss the exclusivity of being in the hangar.
I hear you. Also, that's still the best bathrooms in the entire con were in North, and that's still the case, only now you got to go up to the fourth floor and experience.
Right, exactly. So I feel like that will be the next thing. I don't know where it's going to go in terms of publishers. I feel like domestic publishers either decided to opt out or are kind of being pushed out by the Japanese companies, which isn't a horrible thing. I mean, it's all comics, but I would love to see DC, for example, have the kind of presence that it used to have at these shows.
Absolutely. I was talking to Sal upstairs, and he gave me similar opinions. Uncle Sal, by the way. Good old Uncle Sal. Nothing quite like hearing him talking about slipping a 20 to somebody to cut the line of cats. That man is a genius. Absolutely. I want to make sure you get to actually sell your wares here at the con, my friend. So let people know where they can find you, what you got upcoming that you can talk about, all that jazz.
Okay, where can you find me? You go to JamalEichel.com. They have links to all of my socials. It makes it very, very easy. What am I working on to talk about? I could talk about The Wrong Earth, We Can Be Heroes #1, which comes out on October 25th.
Hell yeah.
And issue 2 comes out in December.
Yep.
And then I'll have some announcements fairly soon about upcoming projects.
Yes, you will, and I can't wait to hear about them. I'm not alluding to anything. Anyway, Jamal, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you more. You know we will.
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic, and more here in the future on CGS as usual.
Excuse me, sir. The show's over.
Is the snack bar still open?
All right. Once again, I hope everybody enjoyed that bit of dialogue there. And thank you once again to Zach, Robert Wilson IV, Jamal Eichel, and Donovan Morgan Grant for taking time to talk to me. It is always a pleasure. And my apologies to Zach and Robert for waiting a year to put this out, but it's still relevant, and they're still talking about their stuff. And if you're going to be at AnimeNYC, please track Zach down, and hopefully you'll be able to buy some stuff. And with that, I will give you the normal ending to the show, because why the heck not? The email address for Comic Timing is comictiming@gmail.com. Facebook.com/Comic Timing is where you can go for conversation on this and other episodes. We're also posting news and whatnot from time to time. You can follow me on Twitter. I am at I_AM_sci-fi. That's I am sci-fi. And even though Brent's not on this episode, you can find him at Casina B on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram as I am sci-fi, Blue Sky as I am sci-fi without the underscores, and a whole bunch of other places. I want to once again thank everybody who joined me on this episode and on every other episode of the show. And as always, there's always time for comics.